In the dimly lit halls of 18th century London, a secret fraternity was rewriting the rules of power and influence. What began as medieval stonemason guilds transformed into something far more mysterious, an organization that would shape nations from behind closed doors. Their symbols hinted at ancient wisdom, their rituals spoke of hidden knowledge, and their secrecy spawned countless conspiracy theories. Freemasonry's true origins remain shrouded in debate, just as its members intended. From Revolutionary War heroes to modern politicians, its reach extends through history in ways that continue to fuel speculation about who really pulls the strings of power.
Between the 12th and 16th centuries, master stonemasons, working on Europe's great cathedrals, developed techniques that would lay the foundation for Freemasonry. These craftsmen faced unprecedented engineering challenges as they constructed soaring Gothic structures that pushed the limits of medieval technology. Their methods for calculating structural loads, distributing weight through flying buttresses, and carving intricate stone tracery required mathematical precision and geometric knowledge beyond ordinary masonry. The construction of these sacred buildings demanded more than physical labor. It required intellectual expertise in geometry, physics, and material science. Masons guarded their specialized knowledge carefully, passing it down through oral tradition rather than written texts. These professional secrets included advanced techniques for creating the precise curves of ribbed vaults and methods for stabilizing towering spires against wind loads. The famous labyrinth at Chartres Cathedral functioned as both a spiritual meditation space and a practical tool for teaching geometric principles to apprentice masons. Medieval stonemason guilds established strict initiation rites to protect their trade knowledge. Candidates underwent years of supervised training before gaining access to the profession's most valuable techniques. The tools of their craft, the square, level, and compass, functioned both as practical instruments and symbolic representations of their skills. Guild lodges served dual purposes as workshops for stone carving and meeting places where masons could exchange ideas away from public scrutiny. These fraternities operated with a strict hierarchy, divided into apprentices, fellow craftsmen, and master masons. The transition between ranks involved increasingly complex tests of skill and knowledge. Original Masonic manuscripts, like the Cook manuscript from around 1450, describe these early trade secrets and rituals, showing how practical skills intertwined with moral instruction. As cathedral construction declined during the Renaissance, many Mason guilds gradually shifted focus from physical building to philosophical discussion. The Regis poem from the late 14th century already shows this evolution, blending practical masonry instructions with moral philosophy and governance principles. Wealthy patrons who admired architecture and geometry began joining these lodges as accepted Masons, non-working members who were attracted by the intellectual aspects of the craft. The transition from operative Masonry to speculative Freemasonry occurred gradually across generations. Some lodges continued construction work, while others focused entirely on philosophical discussion. The earliest known Masonic catechisms from the late 17th century demonstrate this shift, preserving the form of guild examinations while replacing practical questions about stonemasonry with moral and philosophical inquiries. Ancient architecture remained central to this emerging philosophy. The symbolic representation of King Solomon's temple became a key element in speculative masonry's moral teachings. Structures like pillars, arches, and fortresses provided metaphors for virtuous living. The working tools of stonemasons transformed into symbols of personal development. The square representing morality, the compass outlining boundaries of proper conduct, and the level signifying equality. Evidence from Scottish Lodge records shows how these gatherings evolved. The Edinburgh Register House, MS, from 1696, contains Masonic oaths and rituals that mix practical recognition signs with philosophical content. The Chetwood Crawley manuscript from around 1700 describes initiation ceremonies that already resemble modern Freemasonry more than medieval guild practices. These documents demonstrate how Renaissance humanist thought about geometry, architecture, and philosophy merged with medieval craft traditions. By the early 16th century, some lodges had become primarily philosophical societies while maintaining their Masonic heritage. The Dumfries Nose 4 manuscript from around 1010 includes clear references to Solomon's Temple alongside discussions of moral philosophy and geometry. This document marks a nearly complete transition from practical masonry to speculative Freemasonry. The persistence of stonemason symbols in modern Freemasonry reflects this historical evolution. What began as professional tools and techniques for cathedral construction became metaphors for moral development. The square and compass no longer measured physical angles, but represented ethical boundaries. The rough ashlar and perfect ashlar stones transformed from construction materials into symbols of personal refinement. Early Masonic texts show increasing interest in ancient knowledge and esoteric traditions. The Sloane manuscript from the 1640s combines traditional Masonic oaths with references to Hermetic philosophy and biblical allegory. This synthesis of different intellectual currents would characterize speculative Freemasonry's development. The Gothic cathedrals themselves remained important symbols, not just as physical constructions, but as embodiments of the philosophical principles that emerged from their creation. The architectural knowledge that built Europe's great churches became a foundation for systems of moral instruction. Master Masons guarded their construction techniques just as speculative Freemasons would later safeguard their philosophical teachings. The transition from physical to symbolic masonry preserved the craft's central concepts while adapting them for new purposes. As the Renaissance gave way to the Enlightenment, these transformed lodges became incubators for ideas that would influence the modern world. The tools that once shaped stone would later shape philosophical thought, retaining their symbolic power while gaining new meanings. This evolution explains why Freemasonry continues using the working tools of medieval stonemasons centuries after its transition to a philosophical society. The hidden knowledge of cathedral builders lives on not in architectural techniques, but in an enduring system of symbolism and moral philosophy. What began as practical methods for constructing physical buildings became symbolic tools for building character, a transformation central to understanding Freemasonry's origins and lasting influence.
The early 17th century saw fundamental changes in English and Scottish Masonic lodges as they began admitting non-operational members. These initiates, called accepted Masons, came from the educated gentry, professional classes, and aristocracy, rather than the working stonemason tradition. The first recorded instance occurred in 1600 when John Boswell, a Scottish gentleman, was initiated into the Lodge of Edinburgh. This practice became more common throughout the British Isles, particularly among intellectuals drawn to the lodge's philosophical discussions and egalitarian structure. The transition reflected broader societal shifts as Renaissance humanism gave way to Enlightenment rationalism. The formal establishment of modern Freemasonry occurred on June 24, 1717, when 4 London lodges united to form the premier Grand Lodge of England. This central governing body standardized rituals and practices across affiliated lodges. The new organization maintained symbolic connections to Masonry, while focusing predominantly on philosophical and charitable pursuits. Reverend James Anderson, a Scottish Presbyterian minister, played a crucial role by drafting new constitutions in 1723 that transformed medieval guild regulations into Enlightenment principles. His constitutions replaced vocational rules with statements about moral conduct, religious tolerance, and fraternal equality. Anderson's constitutions demonstrated the Enlightenment's influence on Masonic philosophy. The document declared that Freemasons should be peaceable subjects regardless of their political affiliations, and men of honor and honesty regardless of religious denomination. This inclusive approach contrasted sharply with the religious and political divisions of 18th century Europe. The constitutions also minimized references to Christianity, instead discussing a generic supreme being that could encompass various belief systems. These provisions established Freemasonry as potentially radical space in an era when religious conformity remained legally enforced across much of Europe.
The social composition of lodges during this transitional period reveals much about Freemasonry's appeal. Membership rolls from the 1720s show aristocrats sitting alongside merchants, military officers, clergy, and artists. Unlike other contemporary institutions, Masonic lodges organize themselves through meritocratic principles, where a member's rank came from knowledge and dedication rather than birth status. Surviving minutes from early lodges demonstrate this egalitarian approach. Dukes addressed tradesmen as brother, gentlemen recorded minutes for the group, and all members participated equally in decision-making. This structure proved particularly attractive to Enlightenment thinkers who challenged traditional hierarchies. The development of the 3-degree system during this period added complexity to Masonic rituals. The basic entered apprentice degree incorporated elements from medieval guild initiations, while the fellowcraft and master mason degrees expanded philosophical content. Each successive degree introduced initiates to more elaborate allegories and encoded knowledge. The Master Mason degree's Hiram Abiff legend, developed between 1723 and 1730, epitomized this transformation. What originated as a simple medieval trade allegory evolved into a sophisticated philosophical metaphor about fidelity, mortality, and rebirth. Degree rituals enabled lodges to maintain both public presence and private depth, accommodating casual members while offering progressively deeper engagement for dedicated participants. Early Masonic lodges functioned as rare spaces where Enlightenment ideas could spread relatively freely. Lodge records from the 1720s contain discussions of Newtonian physics alongside traditional ritual work. Members corresponded about Locke's theories of government, natural philosophy debates, and developments in mathematics and astronomy. Many lodges maintained libraries that included both Masonic texts and Enlightenment literature. The secrecy of lodges provided some protection from controversial ideas. Controversial ideas could circulate in meetings without fear of public exposure. This combination of intellectual freedom and organizational structure allowed Masonic networks to spread Enlightenment philosophy across national boundaries. The European geographical expansion of Freemasonry demonstrated its adaptability to different cultural contexts. British merchants and military personnel established lodges in port cities like Bordeaux by the 1730s. These foreign lodges often modified rituals to accommodate local customs while maintaining core principles. The first lodge in Paris, formed in the 1720s, attracted liberal aristocrats and intellectuals dissatisfied with absolute monarchy. German lodges developed distinctive mystical traditions influenced by Rosicrucian thought. This international network facilitated exchange of ideas across political frontiers. Newtonian science spread through Masonic connections, as did progressive political theories, challenging divine right monarchy.
Several prominent Enlightenment figures participated in Freemasonry during its formative decades. While Voltaire's association remained brief and possibly opportunistic, others engaged more deeply. Montesquieu corresponded with English Freemasons about constitutional government concepts before publishing The Spirit of Laws. The Scottish philosopher Francis Hutcheson's moral philosophies influenced Masonic teachings on virtue ethics. Benjamin Franklin became an active Mason in Philadelphia during the 1730s, applying fraternal networks to his scientific and political endeavors. These connections increased Freemasonry's reputation as an intellectual movement, while introducing Enlightenment thinkers to its organizational potential. The fraternity's rapid spread across Europe reflected broader trends in 18th century sociability. Like contemporary coffeehouses and literary societies, Masonic lodges offered structured social interaction outside traditional institutions. However, Freemasonry surpassed these informal gatherings through its elaborate ritual framework and international connections. The first Masonic lodges in Vienna hosted musicians like Haydn, who later incorporated Masonic symbolism into compositions. Russian lodges attracted reform-minded nobles exposed to Western ideas. Even in Catholic strongholds like Spain and Portugal, clandestine lodges formed despite ecclesiastical prohibitions. Freemasonry's organizational innovations facilitated its expansion. The Grand Lodge system created administrative hubs that coordinated standards while allowing local variation. Lodges maintained correspondence networks, sharing rituals, philosophical debates, and administrative practices. Printed constitutions and manuals standardized essential elements while permitting regional adaptations. This balance between uniformity and flexibility enabled Freemasonry's ideals to transcend national boundaries while accommodating cultural differences, characteristics that would later enable its global spread through colonial and commercial networks. Philosophical influences extended beyond political theory to embrace emerging scientific paradigms. Masonic rituals incorporated Newtonian concepts of cosmic order and mathematical harmony. Lodge furnishings often featured astronomical symbols representing Enlightenment cosmology. Some Masonic degrees explicitly taught that geometry and architecture revealed divine principles governing the universe, a direct inheritance from medieval Masons blended with contemporary science. This synthesis of ancient symbolism with modern knowledge became characteristic of speculative Freemasonry's intellectual identity. The practical networking functions of lodges also contributed to their growth among mobile populations. Merchants, soldiers, and colonial administrators found familiar institutions wherever Masonic lodges existed. The fraternity provided business connections, financial assistance, and social support for members traveling abroad. Recognition signs and passwords allowed initiates to verify each other's affiliations, a system adapted from medieval guild practices but serving modern needs. These utilitarian aspects complemented the philosophical dimensions, making membership advantageous for professionals across Europe's expanding commercial economies. Critically, Freemasonry's development coincided with the rise of print culture and public discourse. Masonic constitutions circulated widely beyond lodge membership. Newspapers reported on Masonic activities with a mixture of fascination and suspicion. Pamphlets, both defending and attacking Freemasonry, proliferated, increasing public awareness of the fraternity. Some lodges deliberately cultivated reputations for intellectual seriousness by hosting public lectures on scientific topics. This engagement with emerging public spheres distinguished Freemasonry from earlier secret societies, while fueling speculation about its true nature and purposes. The lasting significance of this transitional period appears in how Enlightenment principles became permanently embedded in Masonic philosophy. Concepts of religious toleration, constitutional government, scientific rationalism, and universal brotherhood, once radical notions, became institutionalized within lodge teachings. When revolutionary movements swept across Europe and the Americas later in the 18th century, these Masonic ideas would influence political transformations. The lodges themselves would provide organizational models and networking platforms, facilitating revolutionary coordination across international boundaries. The intellectual seeds planted during Freemasonry's Enlightenment transition ultimately bore fruits far beyond what their founders imagined.
The Masonic initiation ceremony preserves tangible connections to medieval stonemason traditions while incorporating philosophical elements from later periods. Candidates undergo a meticulously staged progression composed of symbolic actions, dramatic representations, and solemn obligations. Each element serves both practical and allegorical purposes, maintaining historical lineage while conveying Enlightenment-era moral teachings. The entered apprentice degree forms the foundation of this system, using the physical tools of operative masonry to represent abstract virtues. The compass demarcates boundaries of acceptable conduct, while the square embodies moral rectitude. These tangible objects anchor metaphysical concepts in familiar forms, allowing initiates to grasp philosophical principles through concrete symbolism. Medieval stonemasons used these tools practically. Speculative masons employ them as aids to character development. The initial preparation of candidates mirrors historical practices from trade guild initiations.
Before entering the lodge space, aspirants undergo symbolic purification and preparation rituals that echo medieval craft ceremonies. Blindfolding originated from practical measures to protect trade secrets, but evolved into representations of intellectual darkness preceding Enlightenment. Candidates remove metallic objects in a tradition dating to operative Masons who worked with precious metals, a security measure transformed into a metaphor for eliminating material distractions. The ceremonial removal of outer clothing references medieval craft customs while symbolizing the shedding of worldly pretenses. These preparatory rites simultaneously preserve historical practices and signify moral transformation. The ritual structure incorporates dramatic elements borrowed from medieval mystery plays. Officers play designated roles in allegorical tableaux that instruct through symbolic action rather than direct lecture. The candidate's guided movement through the lodge space represents a metaphorical journey from ignorance to understanding, significantly enriching the psychological impact of the experience. Degree ceremonies feature scripted exchanges between officers that follow patterns established in 17th century Scottish lodges. The precise wording of these dialogues preserves elements from operative Masonry while emphasizing philosophical instruction. Senior officers wear badges of office directly descended from medieval guild positions. The worshipful master's gavel descended from the stonemason's setting maul, now representing authority and decision-making responsibility. Secret modes of recognition form perhaps the most direct inheritance from operative Masonry. The grip, a distinctive handshake, originally allowed traveling craftsmen to prove their qualifications across medieval Europe, recognizing fellow trained Masons. Significantly, the 17th century Edinburgh Register House manuscript documents early forms of these grips and passwords, verifying their medieval origins. Additional recognition signs include symbolic gestures and coded phrases that members use to identify each other. Operative Masons guarded these signs carefully because they protected professional standing, while speculative Freemasons preserved them as connections to their craft heritage. The system expanded to include additional signs in higher degrees, maintaining historical continuity while accommodating philosophical developments. The oath of secrecy represents another direct inheritance from operative Masonry traditions. Medieval guilds required solemn oaths to prevent disclosure of trade techniques considered valuable intellectual property. Masonic obligations preserve this concept while applying it to philosophical teachings and fraternal confidences. Specific wording varies between jurisdictions, but consistently emphasizes moral responsibilities over commercial concerns. Candidates swear these oaths on volumes representing sacred texts, maintaining the gravity medieval craftsmen attached to such pledges. The commitments include promises to assist fellow members, reflecting both guild mutual aid practices and Enlightenment-era ideals of brotherhood. Penalties referenced in the obligations originated from medieval legal sanctions for breaking trade oaths, but now serve symbolic reminders of fidelity's importance. The entered apprentice degree focuses predominantly on moral instruction using stonemason symbols. The working tools of the degree, the 24-inch gauge and common gavel, represent time management and self-improvement respectively. Lectures explain how operative Masons used these implements practically while elaborating their symbolic meanings for personal development. The lodge itself represents King Solomon's temple, not as architectural study, but as metaphor for individual moral construction. Candidates learn that stonemasons historically worked with three substances, echoing the three stages of human development and moral states. These layered interpretations demonstrate Masonry's method of deriving philosophical lessons from craft practices. Subsequent degrees expand on this foundation with increasingly complex symbolism. The Fellowcraft degree introduces additional tools representing intellectual growth, including the square, symbolizing conscience, grounding ethical behavior. Its lectures incorporate Pythagorean mathematics and classical architectural principles, demonstrating Masonry's integration of Renaissance learning. The plum represents moral uprightness, while the level signifies equality before natural law, combining operative Masonry concepts with Enlightenment philosophy. Lectures in this degree reference the 7 liberal arts and sciences, recasting medieval educational principles through an Enlightenment lens. The progression from operational to philosophical interpretation becomes explicit as candidates analyze tools they've already encountered in their operative forms.
The Master Mason degree completes the foundational triad with its dramatic presentation of the Hieronymic legend deriving from medieval craft lore. This narrative transforms a simple trade allegory about fidelity into an elaborate metaphor for mortality, legacy, and rebirth. The ceremony incorporates elements resembling medieval liturgical drama while conveying philosophical content. Candidates encounter new implements, including the trowel, symbolizing the spreading of brotherly love, completing the transformation from construction tools to moral emblems. Lectures in this degree reference Rosicrucian and Hermetic concepts, reflecting Masonry's absorption of Renaissance esotericism, tracing back to 17th century Scottish lodges that first incorporated mystical elements. The physical environment of the lodge reinforces ritual teachings through purposeful symbolism. The black and white mosaic pavement represents duality and moral choices, continuing a medieval design motif found in cathedral labyrinths. Positioned between the pillars of Boaz and Jachin, referencing Solomon's temple, the arrangement recalls architectural elements while signifying stability and establishment. The orientation of the lodge space follows medieval cathedral alignment traditions, reinforcing connections to operative Masonry's ecclesiastical projects. The blazing star in the ceiling symbolizes divine providence, directing human endeavors, as medieval Masons believed celestial alignments governed sacred architecture. Every architectural feature serves instructional purposes, maintaining ties to craft traditions while conveying speculative meanings. Ritual vestments similarly bridge operative and speculative practices. The white lambskin apron, descended from protective work garments, signifies moral purity in its current usage. Early lodge records from the 1690s show gradual transformation of work apparel into ceremonial garb, reflecting the society's philosophical evolution. The placement of aprons during ceremonies follows patterns established in operative lodges, where different ranks wore distinct styles, indicating their status. Modern Masonic regalia preserves these distinctions while adding layers of emblematic meaning through added symbols and ornamentation, charting the society's intellectual development. The progression through degrees mirrors apprenticeship systems from medieval guilds while establishing philosophical benchmarks. Candidates advance through sequential stages, demonstrating mastery of symbolic content rather than manual skills, recalling craft education methods transformed for intellectual purposes. Examinations between degrees test comprehension of moral teachings instead of technical knowledge, continuing operative Masonry's emphasis on standards while redirecting focus. The 3-degree system, crystallized in the 1720s, expanded on earlier 2-stage craft divisions, accommodating more sophisticated philosophical content as Masonry developed.
Musical components of the rituals preserve medieval craft traditions while enhancing dramatic effect. Certain responses follow Gregorian chant patterns, recalling cathedral construction environments, incorporating sacred music into speculative practice. The positioning of officers reflects medieval workshop hierarchies transformed into a philosophical governance model, preserving structural continuity across centuries. Ceremonial processions mimic medieval guild parades, repurposed as pedagogical demonstrations, enacting symbolic journeys through Masonic teachings, emphasizing the society's dual heritage. The transmission mechanism for these rituals demonstrates careful preservation amidst philosophical evolution. Masonic catechisms dating to the 1690s show gradual expansion from simple trade questions to complex moral interrogations, documenting the transition period. Manuscript exposures from the early 1700s reveal stability in core ritual elements, despite variations in phrasing and presentation between jurisdictions, reflecting localized adaptation of enduring principles. Printed rituals from the 1740s onwards standardized content while permitting interpretive flexibility, maintaining the balance between uniformity and adaptation, characterizing Masonic development. The psychological impact of these rituals stems from their synthesis of dramatic elements and intellectual content, creating profound experiential learning. Candidates undergo structured confrontations with symbolic representations of moral concepts, engaging multiple senses simultaneously. The combination of physical movement, verbal dialogue, visual symbolism, and solemn obligation produces memorable impressions, reinforcing philosophical teachings. This multi-sensory approach descended from medieval mystery plays, teaching biblical stories through dramatic reenactment, demonstrates Masonry's innovative adaptation of traditional methods for Enlightenment purposes. The lasting influence manifests in members' ability to recall ritual content precisely, even years later, demonstrating the effectiveness of this pedagogical method derived from, but transcending its craft origins. Contemporary Masonic rituals preserve approximately 70% of the content documented in early 18th century exposures, demonstrating remarkable continuity with historical forms despite centuries of societal change. Modern modifications primarily involve eliminating anachronistic language rather than altering substantive content, reflecting the society's commitment to preserving its historical legacy while remaining relevant. The enduring appeal of these ceremonies lies in their successful fusion of tangible craft traditions with timeless philosophical principles, creating a uniquely impactful initiation experience that transformed medieval trade practices into vehicles for moral instruction adapted to Enlightenment ideals, yet rooted in centuries-old practices surviving through careful transmission generations of practitioners committed to preserving their peculiar synthesis of history and philosophy.
British regiments stationed in North America established the first Masonic lodges on colonial soil during the 1730s. These military lodges, authorized by English and Irish Grand Lodges, provided structure for soldiers stationed far from home, while inadvertently planting seeds of fraternalism that would take root among colonial elites. The first lodge in Boston received its charter in 1733, followed shortly by lodges in Philadelphia and Portsmouth. These early installations operated under military jurisdiction, but soon attracted civilian members who reshaped them into permanent fixtures of colonial society. The St. John's Lodge in Boston exemplified this transition when local merchants assumed control from the departing British regiment that had originally established it. Benjamin Franklin's involvement with Philadelphia's lodge marked a turning point in American Masonic development. In 1734, Franklin published Anderson's Constitutions, the first Masonic book printed in America, which adapted European Masonic law for colonial conditions. His printing operation produced Masonic materials that circulated throughout the colonies, standardizing practices and extending the fraternity's intellectual reach. As Postmaster General, Franklin utilized colonial postal routes to facilitate communication between lodges, spanning Portsmouth to Charleston. His political connections gave Masonic activities credibility among colonial leaders, while his diplomatic travels to Europe strengthened transatlantic Masonic networks that later proved strategically valuable. The physical spaces hosting Masonic meetings contributed significantly to their social function. Philadelphia's Toon Tavern and Boston's Green Dragon Tavern served dual purposes as drinking establishments and lodge rooms. These venues provided neutral gathering places where merchants, lawyers, and artisans could mingle beyond rigid colonial social hierarchies. The private chambers reserved for Masonic rituals offered secure environments for discussions that might have attracted British suspicion if conducted openly. Lodge membership rolls from this period show unique intersections of colonial society: wealthy planters sitting alongside tradesmen, Anglican ministers debating with deists, all bound by shared Masonic affiliation.
The organizational structure of Masonic lodges provided revolutionary leaders with pre-existing networks for political coordination. The system of grand lodges, provincial deputies, and constituent lodges mirrored governmental structures while operating outside official channels. Masonic rituals included protocols for verifying members' identities and credentials, techniques revolutionaries adapted for clandestine communications. The fraternity's emphasis on secrecy allowed politically sensitive information to circulate through Masonic channels with reduced risk of British interception. Regional Grand Lodges facilitated coordination across colony lines long before formal political unions emerged among the colonies themselves. Numerous key figures in the revolutionary movement maintained active Masonic affiliations. George Washington joined Fredericksburg Lodge No. 4 in 1752, remaining engaged throughout his military and political careers. Paul Revere served as Grand Master of the Massachusetts Grand Lodge while simultaneously coordinating Patriot intelligence networks. John Hancock presided over St. Andrew's Lodge during critical years preceding the Revolution. The overlap between Masonic leadership and revolutionary organization suggests the fraternity's institutional resources were deliberately employed for political purposes. Masonic lodges didn't create revolutionary sentiment, but provided infrastructure through which existing discontent could organize and act. The Boston Tea Party incident of December 1773 demonstrates Masonic involvement in revolutionary action. Participants included at least 10 known Freemasons from St. Andrew's Lodge, meeting at their regular gathering place in the Green Dragon Tavern before proceeding to Griffin's Wharf. The lodge's minutes from subsequent meetings show careful avoidance of any reference to the event, suggesting purposeful secrecy.
British authorities specifically cited Masonic secrecy rituals when investigating the incident, recognizing the fraternity's potential for coordinating resistance. The Tea Party's successful execution relied on precisely the kind of covert planning and disciplined coordination that Masonic training cultivated. During the Revolutionary War, Masonic connections facilitated military cooperation. When Continental Army officers from different colonies needed to establish trust quickly, shared Masonic affiliation provided instant credibility. Knox and Greene utilized Masonic networks to coordinate artillery shipments and supply lines. Prisoner exchanges sometimes hinged on Masonic recognitions between opposing officers. The famous incident at Fort Mifflin, where British Captain Montresor provided humanitarian aid to besieged American forces after recognizing Masonic signs, illustrates the fraternity's trans-battlefield bonds. These interactions didn't undermine military objectives, but demonstrated how Masonic brotherhood could temper warfare's harshness. Post-independence, Masonic symbolism permeated the new nation's iconography. The Great Seal of the United States incorporated multiple elements with Masonic connotations, including the all-seeing eye and unfinished pyramid. Early American silver coins featured Masonic-inspired designs proposed by engravers belonging to the fraternity. The Founding Fathers consciously employed architectural metaphors borrowed from Masonic ritual when describing governmental structures. Washington's Masonic funeral in 1799 set enduring precedents for civic commemoration, blending Republican simplicity with Masonic ceremonialism.
Architecturally, Masonic influence appears in numerous early government buildings designed by Masonic architects. Benjamin Latrobe's work on the U.S. Capitol incorporated Masonic geometric principles and symbolic proportions. The Massachusetts State House's cornerstone ceremony in 1795 followed Masonic ritual protocols, with Paul Revere participating in his capacity as Grand Master. These public applications of Masonic tradition demonstrated the fraternity's transition from secret society to civic institution. The ceremonial trowel used in the Capitol's cornerstone laying became part of the Senate's artifact collection, symbolizing Masonry's sanctioned role in national foundations. Education systems in the early Republic also reflected Masonic ideals. Numerous colleges established Masonic-affiliated chapters that influenced curricular development. The fraternity promoted literacy through large libraries and supported textbook publication efforts. Masonic emphasis on geometry and architecture shaped early engineering education programs. The 7 liberal arts model, referenced in Masonic ritual, informed academic structures at newly founded institutions like Columbia and the University of Pennsylvania. This educational influence extended Masonic ideas beyond lodge rooms into formative American intellectual institutions. The economic dimensions of Masonic participation affected early American business practices. The fraternity's network facilitated commercial relationships across regional markets. Merchant members used Masonic connections to establish credit lines and verify business associates' reputations. Marine insurance underwriters frequently belonged to Masonic lodges, creating informal assurance networks for transatlantic shipping. These economic functions complemented Masonry's philosophical teachings about integrity and fair dealing in commerce, principles that aligned with developing American capitalist ethics. The international aspects of American Freemasonry retained significance after independence. Correspondence with European lodges continued, particularly with French Masons who had supported the revolutionary cause. The Marquis de Lafayette's 1824 American tour included numerous Masonic ceremonies celebrating the Franco-American alliance. These transatlantic connections helped legitimize the new nation within European diplomatic circles, while reinforcing Republican ideals abroad. American Masonic leaders consciously positioned their organization as a bridge between revolutionary values and established institutions. The anti-Masonic movement that emerged in the 1820s paradoxically confirmed the fraternity's profound influence on early American society. Critics attacked Masonry precisely because of its extensive integration into political, social, and economic structures. The Morgan Affair controversy revealed how thoroughly Masonic affiliation had become intertwined with public life in many communities. This backlash temporarily diminished Masonic membership, but couldn't erase the substantial contributions to the nation's formative decades. The very intensity of opposition testified to Masonry's success in shaping foundational aspects of American identity.
Contemporary Freemasonry directs substantial resources toward philanthropic endeavors, with charitable giving now forming a defining feature of the organization's public identity. The Shriners Hospitals for Children network stands as the most visible manifestation of this commitment, operating 22 specialized medical facilities across North America that provide free care to children regardless of family income. Since its establishment in 1922, the Shriners healthcare system has treated over 1.5 million children, focusing on orthopedic conditions, burns, spinal cord injuries, and cleft lip palate. This medical philanthropy evolved from earlier Masonic hospital foundations dating to the 18th century, when lodges maintained infirmaries for sick members and their families. Modern Masonic charities extend beyond medical care to include disaster relief efforts coordinated through international Grand Lodge networks. Following major catastrophes like Hurricane Katrina and the 2011 Japanese tsunami, Masonic organizations mobilized rapid response teams and contributed millions in relief funding. Local lodges implement community service programs tailored to regional needs. Urban lodges frequently operate food banks and homeless outreach initiatives, while rural chapters often focus on veterans assistance and educational scholarships. The Masonic Model Student Assistance Program, active in several U.S. states, trains educators to identify at-risk students through a system originally developed by Pennsylvania Masons in the 1980s. Large sponsored scholarship funds distribute approximately $3 million annually to college-bound students across America, with selection criteria emphasizing civic engagement over academic achievement alone. These localized efforts complement national Masonic philanthropy while allowing individual lodges to maintain visibility within their communities. Contemporary lodge facilities often double as event spaces for blood drives, vaccination clinics, and public safety trainings conducted in partnership with civic organizations. Membership qualifications have undergone significant evolution to emphasize moral character as the primary criterion for admission. where colonial-era lodges restricted membership to property-owning white males, modern Grand Lodges explicitly welcome applicants regardless of race, religion, or socio-economic status. The United Grand Lodge of England's current membership policies explicitly state that candidates should be of good moral character and believe in a supreme being, without imposing narrower doctrinal requirements. Background checks and personal interviews now supplement the traditional system of member recommendations, reflecting contemporary standards for organizational accountability. This shift toward inclusivity has gradually diversified Masonic demographics, though the aging membership base presents ongoing recruitment challenges. Current membership statistics indicate average age of North American Masons as 62, prompting various youth outreach initiatives.
Ritual practices maintain continuity with historical forms while incorporating measured adaptations to modern sensibilities. Traditional initiation ceremonies retain the symbolic use of stonemasons' tools, but now include explanatory materials for initiates unfamiliar with ancient craft terminology. The entered apprentice degree's moral lessons remain unchanged, though lodges have adjusted physical aspects of the rituals to accommodate contemporary safety standards and disability accessibility. Some jurisdictions have digitized record-keeping for membership tracking while preserving handwritten minutes for ceremonial purposes. The widespread availability of ritual information online has prompted lodges to emphasize experiential aspects of initiation rather than secrecy per se, focusing on fostering personal transformation through dramatic ritual theater. Digital technology presents both opportunities and challenges for an organization rooted in personal connections. Nearly 80% of U.S. lodges now maintain active social media presences to counteract misinformation while carefully avoiding disclosure of internal proceedings. Online platforms have enabled virtual meetings for educational purposes, though formal rituals continue requiring physical presence to preserve their experiential impact. The Masonic Library and Museum of Pennsylvania's digital archive has made over 85,000 historical documents publicly accessible, balancing transparency with privacy protections for living members. Cybersecurity measures have become essential considerations for Grand Lodge administrations managing sensitive membership data and financial transactions. Some lodges utilize encrypted communication channels for officer correspondence, while maintaining public-facing websites to disseminate accurate information about Masonic activities. Membership statistics reveal fluctuating trends across different regions since the peak participation years following World War II. Current estimates suggest approximately 1.2 million Freemasons in the United States, compared to 4 million in 1959. Britain's United Grand Lodge reports 180,000 members in 2023, down from over 300,000 in the 1960s. Areas seeing stable or growing enrollment often emphasize community service and professional networking alongside traditional ritual work. Lodges affiliated with universities have shown particular resilience, with campus-based chapters attracting younger members through intellectual programming. The Netherlands and several Nordic countries report modest membership increases in recent years, possibly reflecting interest in alternative social structures among millennials and Generation Z. The fraternity continues attracting men seeking structured personal development outside conventional religious or professional frameworks. Psychological studies of Masonic membership suggest the appeal lies in combining cognitive stimulation through ritual symbolism with opportunities for mentorship and camaraderie. Modern lodges frequently emphasize stress management techniques drawn from Masonic meditation practices alongside traditional moral philosophy. The absence of mandated doctrine allows members to interpret teachings individually while benefiting from group accountability mechanisms. Corporate professionals, military veterans, and retirees comprise significant demographic segments drawn by the organization's emphasis on character development and community impact. Recent ethnographic research indicates that many new members cite dissatisfaction with purely digital social networks as motivation for joining physical lodge communities. International Masonic relations have expanded significantly with the establishment of Grand Lodges in former Soviet bloc nations following the Cold War's conclusion. The Grand Lodge of Russia, constituted in 1995, now supervises 43 constituent lodges and maintains relations with Masonic bodies worldwide. This global network facilitates cultural exchange programs and coordinated humanitarian efforts while respecting national sovereignty through autonomous Grand Lodge governance. The Masonic Peace Committee, founded in 1997, sponsors academic research on conflict resolution and provides mediation training incorporating Masonic principles of tolerance and compromise. Such initiatives reflect ongoing efforts to adapt historic Masonic ideals to contemporary global challenges.
Financial transparency mechanisms have increased substantially since the 20th century, with most Grand Lodges publishing annual reports detailing charitable distributions and operational expenditures. The Widow's Cup tradition, where members contribute funds for needy families at meetings, has expanded into formal benevolent programs administered by trained caseworkers. Modern Masonic funds frequently partner with professional financial advisors to ensure sustainable management of endowment resources, supporting long-term charitable commitments. Accountability standards vary by jurisdiction, but typically include independent audits and oversight committees elected from the general membership. The tension between tradition and modernity manifests in ongoing debates about Masonic relevance in diverse societies. Conservative factions emphasize preserving ritual exactness and hierarchical structures, while progressive voices advocate for expanded community engagement and streamlined administrative processes. Nearly all contemporary lodges have eliminated racially exclusionary language from governing documents, though historical research continues uncovering problematic aspects of Masonic racial history. The Grand Lodge of California's apology for past discrimination against Black Masons in 2020 exemplifies attempts to reconcile with difficult institutional legacies. Similar reconciliation efforts address historical tensions with marginalized groups while maintaining fidelity to Masonism's core philosophical tenets. Professionalization of Masonic administration has increased as volunteer officers handle complex legal compliance and risk management requirements exceeding 18th-century lodge operations. Many Grand Lodges now employ full-time executive secretaries overseeing day-to-day operations, supported by information technology staff managing membership databases and communication systems. Standardized officer training programs ensure continuity of leadership despite high turnover in elected positions. These structural adaptations aim to sustain Masonic institutions amid 21st century organizational challenges while preserving essential fraternal traditions. The interplay between secrecy and transparency continues evolving as lodges navigate contemporary privacy norms. Most jurisdictions have abandoned antiquated oath penalties while maintaining confidentiality expectations regarding member identification and ritual specifics. Public open houses and historical exhibitions demystify Masonic symbolism without disclosing protected elements like recognition signs. Some European lodges have established associate membership categories, allowing limited participation by non-Masons interested in the fraternity's philanthropic and educational programming. These measured disclosures aim to cultivate accurate public understanding while safeguarding aspects of Masonic practice deemed essential to initiation's transformative power. The organization's gradual adaptation to modern expectations of accountability suggests an enduring, if transformed, role for fraternal societies in contemporary civic life.
Freemasonry's transformation from medieval stonemason guilds to a global fraternity reflects broader societal shifts in Western civilization. Its progression mirrors evolving concepts of brotherhood, morality, and civic engagement through major historical periods. The organization's longevity stems from its adaptable structure while maintaining core principles of character development through symbolic education. Current membership challenges contrast with the fraternity's historical influence on political and cultural developments. Future viability depends on balancing ancient traditions with modern expectations of transparency and inclusivity. As one of history's most enduring voluntary associations, Freemasonry demonstrates how institutions can evolve while preserving continuity with their origins. Its story remains intertwined with modernity's philosophical foundations.